Do you know how to identify a killer in a crowd by just one tattoo? Or which tattoos belong to criminal authorities? Today, I'll tell you about prison tattoos, how they're made, and what they signify. And in the end, you'll learn
shocking information about one of the most popular tattoos worldwide. Enjoy watching.
Do you know how tattoos are made in prisons? You've probably heard about the methods from previous videos, about using burnt rubber or soot. But perhaps the most hygienic and common method is quite different from those brutal ideas used in the strictest colonies. In all prisons where pens can be obtained, ordinary ink is used. That's why many tattoos have a blue tint. Getting ink paste is generally not a difficult task, especially if the conditions are not too strict. But then another question arises: where to get a needle to do these tattoos? I've searched through many websites, found a bunch of articles, and even video interviews with a person who dealt with this difficult task, and he said that they used ordinary needles from syringes for this. Yes, it sounds very strange. Who could allow dangerous criminals to have such a menacing item with them? But that's a slightly different topic about how anything can be obtained in prisons. By the way, if you want a video on this topic, write it in the comments, and I'll continue my story for now. So, these needles are simply loaded with ink paste and then attached to a regular pencil. They do this to make the work easier. In general, this method is extremely common in many prisons around the world, but over time, such tattoos don't look their best, as the inks don't have such a deep color. But due to the availability of the necessary tools and consumables, this method is very popular. By the way, what tattoos come to mind when you're asked about criminal authorities? Surely thief stars, which have become hugely popular thanks to various movies. But there are much less known tattoos by which you can distinguish a leader among criminals. For example, if there is a tattoo of a naked woman crucified on a cross on the chest or thigh with the inscription Amen above, then most likely you're in front of a very important person. Usually such tattoos are worn by authorities, and this tattoo symbolizes that the prisoner has fully avenged betrayal. By the way, a naked woman doesn't necessarily indicate a loved one. Any close traitor could be the victim.
A relative, friend, it doesn't matter. There is another tattoo that thieves in law or overseers often wear. It's a skull pierced with a dagger. Usually, next to it, they depict a rose and a snake coiling
around the weapon. It's applied to the shoulder, sometimes to the chest. If you meet such a person on the street, know that they are a very important figure in the criminal world. It symbolizes the eternal struggle of a person, which is very characteristic of all criminal authorities. Tattoos can also indicate the nationality of the prisoner. If you meet a person with a Star of David, around which a winged snake is coiled, then you're facing a Jew, but not a simple one. The snake means that this person belongs to the caste of winged ones, that is, camp authorities. In general, there are many such tattoos, so only by them can you understand which caste a person belongs to and whether it's worth dealing with them.
But what about criminal authorities?
Let me tell you instead how to understand what crime a person committed. For example, there's a tattoo with a key and crossed arrows. They were tattooed on burglars, apartment thieves, and other criminals who robbed ordinary citizens. And professional pickpockets tattoo cats on themselves. But not always ordinary ones. Some let their imagination run wild and make tattoos, for example, with a cat that very much resembles a character from the cartoon Shrek. Here, everyone indulges as they can. But I much prefer the idea of a tattoo with insects, particularly with a beetle. Just read the first 3 letters, and you'll understand everything. They are usually made small and inconspicuous. But if you still couldn't understand the meaning of the beetle, here's the decryption for you. I wish you successful theft. Interesting, isn't it? Many prisoners tattoo portraits of the famous Russian poet, Sergei Yesenin. Why him? It's all about the writer's biography. If you didn't know, Yesenin was a real rebel, and he also had a wonderful poem, Hooligan. That's why criminals who got a sentence for hooliganism tattoo themselves with the famous poet. I wonder if he would have liked such fame. And murderers most often tattoo themselves with an image of a dagger. However, there are quite a lot of them too. For example, if a dagger pierces a shoulder board, It means the prisoner committed a crime against police officers or military personnel. And if a snake coils around the weapon, it means the criminal was convicted of premeditated murder. Such a picture was tattooed by professional killers and hired assassins. All the previous tattoos I've told you about mostly relate to Russian prisons. But what about other countries? Here's a real treasure trove of interesting images. And most importantly, some of these tattoos can indicate which gang or group a person belongs to. For example, in Latin America, as you may know, there's a huge number of different criminal groups and gangs. And while in most cases there, tattoos with a real mix of Catholic and pagan motifs are popular, the Salvadoran Ant Brigade is very different from them. By the way, they're one of the most frightening and brutal organized criminal groups in the world, and its name is pronounced as Mara Salvatrucha. So, if you meet someone with huge tattoos with the initials MS, it's better to leave them as soon as possible. You'll also likely notice that the tattoos are done with a certain satanic undertone. Members of the gang mostly get tattoos with numerous goat skulls, horns, and even demons. And I think it's a pretty good idea considering the cruelty of these people. But I'll tell you about that maybe next time.
Personally, I really like the Gothic style of such tattoos. It looks really cool and also reminds me of the early 2000s when the goth movement was particularly popular among young people.
What do you know about one of the oldest Mexican criminal organizations called La EMI? Personally, I've heard that these guys are also very brutal, and I really like their tattoos too. Though, they remind me of scenes from the movie Cast Away with Tom Hanks. What am I talking about? Well, the distinctive attributes of their tattoos are immediately noticeable. It's a palm print, inside of which you can see the letter M. By the way, even this letter has a special meaning. It's not just an indication that this guy is from Mexico, it's an abbreviation of the word Mexicanemi, which translates as one who walks with God in their heart. That's why this tattoo is applied to the left side of the chest. And if you meet someone with two M letters, know that this guy definitely belongs to the Mexican mafia. Generally, it's rumored that these are two different, albeit friendly groups. But personally, I think it all belongs to one gang, as their attributes are way too similar. And also, in the center of the palm print, they add a skull, which also indicates affiliation with the gang, and most often symbolizes that this guy is very dangerous. By the way, besides the well-known palm print, this gang also has its own coat of arms. Usually the word Mexicanemi is written on top, and an eagle is depicted in the emblem. Knives are often crossed in the background. It actually looks very interesting. So, which of these two gangs do you think has the coolest tattoos? As you've already understood, all gangs in the world have their distinguishing features. I've also told you that different tattoos can have different meanings. But did you know that they can also be combined? Yes, in some gangs, there are very resourceful guys. For example, in one of the previous videos, I already talked about the 18th Street Gang. If you remember, the guys from this group love to make huge tattoos with the numbers 1 and 8. Basically, it's immediately understood from them that this guy belongs to an organized criminal group. But some of them improve such tattoos. Look at this photo. As you can see, inside these numbers, various faces are depicted. Personally, I see clowns there, and as you may know, they signify a person's attitude towards life. Such tattoos literally say, "I'll have fun today, I'll cry later." Cool, isn't it? And the number 8 on his body may resemble a tombstone, although they are tattooed higher. These indicate mourning for the loss of loved ones and friends. Some incorporate gang attributes into them, for example, a cannabis leaf. It means that this bandit is involved in the production and distribution of drugs.
In general, gangsters also have a pretty cool imagination. And I would like to give credit, many of the tattoos I've talked about today, I really like personally.
They look very cool, though I won't be getting them myself. After all, I'm not a gangster. But I was shocked by the information I found, perhaps about one of the most popular tattoos in the world. I'm talking about that tear under the eye. Everyone gets it, whoever they are. For example, rappers, designers, criminals, and pedophiles. Yes, you probably didn't know about the meaning and significance of this tattoo in different parts of our planet. In America, for example, a tear under the eye means that a person has lost a loved one or a friend. Basically, like a tombstone. In the criminal world, there are two types of such tiers. One is empty, and the other is completely filled in. If the tier is filled in, it means the person has avenged a loved one, and vice versa. Generally, the meaning of the tier in Western culture is that a man shouldn't cry, so this tattoo represents all his emotions. But there's another meaning. For example, many killers wear this tattoo. So, if you meet a guy on the street who has this tattoo, he may not necessarily have lost a loved one. It's quite possible that he's a real killer. By the way, tiers are also depicted with dots. This means that the person is only planning to commit a crime. In general, lots of different meanings, and all of this in one country. And now imagine what's going on abroad. I strongly advise you to avoid getting this tattoo if, by some twist of fate, you risk ending up in an Australian prison. Why? Because in this country, such a tattoo has a completely different meaning. A tear under the eye is a real stigma, which means that the person has been convicted of violence and pedophilia. Naturally, even on the streets of Australia, people will look at you very suspiciously. Not to mention in prisons. If you end up there, you're risking not only your health, but also your life. We all know how pedophiles are treated in correctional facilities. By the way, in prisons in the CIS countries, this tattoo also has a negative meaning. They signify that the criminal has been lowered, that is, raped in prison. Do I need to say what will happen if a person with such a tattoo ends up in correctional facilities? By the way, they get it forcibly in prisons. So many of the criminals who have earned such a tattoo try their best to get rid of it after their sentence is served.
By the way, in Latin American organized criminal groups, there's another wonderful tattoo, playing dice and cards.
As you can understand, these tattoos mean that a person is very addicted to gambling, and in principle, in the West, no one cares which playing cards to get tattooed. In general, they tattoo whatever they want there, and they're wrong. Why, you might ask me, and I'll answer you. The thing is, not in all countries, as in the case of the tier, do the same tattoos have the same attitude. Let me give you an example of Russian prisons. If an inmate has a spade card tattooed, it means that he's a very influential person and a real criminal authority. So Latin Americans who end up in Russian prisons with such tattoos will be respected. But if they have a crown tattooed with hearts and diamonds, it's game over. Because in Russia, these tattoos mean that this criminal belongs to homosexuals. And as you understand, they don't treat them ceremoniously in prison. It's considered that a true professional, if I may say so, who should satisfy the basic instinct of all other inmates, gets such a tattoo. And a person with such a tattoo bears the sounding, but not the best name, King of all suits. By the way, if you have a tattoo with a naked beauty against the background of a deck of cards and a bouquet of roses, then you're also not very lucky. In other countries, this tattoo can mean a love for women and gambling. But in Russia, it means that the criminal didn't pay his debts on time and now he's considered lowered. Well, and they treat him accordingly. In general, it's all horror. And what do you think? Why does the meaning, seemingly, of the same tattoos change so much from country to country? Write about it in the comments.
In this video, I've told you the most interesting facts about prison tattoos.
Personally, I was most amazed by the fact that some tattoos popular in everyday life are considered horrible in the criminal world. But I would like to give credit. To get a tattoo in prison in such a way, you need to be a pro. And you know where else pros are needed? In our team. Friends, you have the opportunity to join our team. If you have skills in video editing, can voice videos in Russian, English, and other languages, or write interesting scripts, we'll be happy to work with you. Write to the Telegram bot, link in the description. And thank you for watching.